Good evening, everyone. We continue our study in the book of Second Samuel. We left off yesterday in verse 12. Just a quick recap. The Ark of the Covenant was moved to the house of Obed Edom, and it was told to the king that for the couple of months that it sat there, for 3 months in verse 11, at the end of that period, it was told to the king that, well, God has blessed the house of Obed Edom. And here would be Jehovah. And I was telling everyone that when you talk about blessing in the Hebrew concept, it would be something that's visual that they can see and all that belongs to him. So it's blessing the house and everything that belongs to him. That would be the material things, that would be the children or the grandchildren, or they could be conceived. Because only 3 months you won't get a pregnancy completed, but at least they know that he is expecting grandchildren, and the things that belong to him is seen to be blessed. Now, understand the word blessing comes in two forms. To bless is to speak good, right? Speak good of others. We can also see when God blesses, we can see that it also gives us a visual event that can be ascribed to God. Now, I can't tell you exactly what happened, but I had shown you yesterday that Oved Edom had 62 grandchildren from 8 sons. And it says that all that belongs to him is probably the material things. But that's where I would tend to say. And these people is saying God did all these, or it's because of that. And because of the ark of God that was sitting in his house for 3 months. Now, why didn't uh, Avinadav had the same statements? We don't know. So we would not need to speculate, but we don't read of these statements when it was with regards to Avinadav, because, and even though it was sitting in his house for 20 years, none of these were spoken of. But now we seem to see that it was Oved Edom who enjoyed the blessings of God. Now, I had also mentioned to you that it was at this time that David agreed that this was God's blessing. And by seeing God's blessing in this case, it brought to David as an indicator that God was happy. So we can say that this blessing shows God is pleased. Now, also understand that it has everything to do with David. So David went and brought the ark of God up from the house of Oved Edom to the city of David with joy. Now, as we ended yesterday, although we said that it was David who went and brought, right, went and brought the ark, it was not him doing it by himself. So we can see that he was the king to decide. And so it was ascribed to the most powerful. And so it was David who gave that instruction. And the idea of the ark of God coming out of the house of Oved Edom to the city of David was all about David's actions and David's decisions. Although it was not him who physically moved the ark. Now, that there was a failure yesterday when we read of Uzzah, and so we have a place by the name of Peretz Uzzah, where God exploded his anger upon him. Now, 3 months have passed, and it's time that David sent for the ark, and he went there with joy. This word here is he was very happy. Why? Because he sees that God is pleased, he's happy. It's time to move on. So now in verse 13, we carry on. In verse 13, we continue to see these words. And so it was, this was what happened, that when those carrying the ark of the Lord marched 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fattened steer. Now let's break this down a little bit because some of the translation here might be a bit challenging. So we're saying that, and so it was when those who were carrying, the word carrying here is lifting. And of course, we would then assume that they are carrying the poles, right? Which means that it would be the Ark of the Covenant with the two cherubim at the top. And you see that they had the poles. And with that, you find that they would be carrying it or lifting it up. And so this is where we see them doing it. This is how I think I would depict it. They will carry front and back, and they are lifting. And so this is what it means, lifting, and it's not placed on a wagon or a chariot as we saw yesterday. Now, these people who are carrying were also set to march. And so what they did was they had a marching order, and the march here is in step. That is what it means by march, not just like soldiers marching, but they are marching in rhythm and marching in step. And so in this case, when they have walked 6 paces, and we read that uh and we read this, that he, the word he here is David. Sister, David sacrificed, and this word sacrifice means to slaughter. It's always to do with animals. And he slaughtered an ox. That's correct. And he slaughtered a fattened. Now, the word steer would be, how would you say, an ox as well. Uh, and so we are seeing that this is, this may be seen as an A and a B, right? A and a B. The ox that it was slaughtered is fattened. Fattened means the ox was raised to be fat for an offering or a sacrifice. So this is a sacrifice type of ox. So I would say this would be an A and a B, giving us two statements that really saying very much of the same thing. It is an ox, a male bull, and then it was fattened as well. And in this case, the fatling is also a male. This is a male. So it's talking about the same thing. The next phrase here is number 14. It says, David was dancing before the Lord with all his strength. And David was wearing a linen ephod or ephod. So let's break this down a little bit. First of all, the word dancing. Please do not think of modern day dancing. It is the ancient way of dancing. And in this case, the dance is really to whirl around, right? To whirl around. And so it is considered dancing. And so I guess it would be a person who would be, spinning around. That would be whirling. So it's jumping and whirling around. And it says, before the Lord. Now, every time you see this word before the Lord, it means to the face of the Lord. Means it is seen as if that it is God is looking at him dancing, and he was dancing with all his might, which means that this one requires strength, right? Requires might, that he has to twirl around, he has to remain in that enjoyment. And David was saying to be wearing a linen ephod. Now, the ephod itself would be, I guess you can see that it is a garment, a garment. It is a tunic. It is made of linen, which means that it is white. And it is generally understood as something that you wear on the inside. And so normally you would actually wear something over it. So the priest would have an ephod, and they would wear something over it as decoration. But in this case, you find that uh, all David has was just this garment. And you would see that eventually, when Michal was upset, you are seeing David in as close to dancing naked. He only had an outer garment that was covering himself. And so, if you think about it, he is a king. And king has his robes, he has his decoration. But right now, David is not in appearance as a king. He is in appearance as a humble person, meaning he has no kingly state. In this particular instance, he was dancing around, he was overjoyed, he was living his the time of his life as a normal citizen before God. And so this is the picture in verse 14. He was not in his regal form. In verse 15, the description is David and all the house of Israel. And when we talk about all the house of Israel, we're not talking about just the northern tribes. This is all 12 tribes. All the house of Israel as a nation, that is Israel in the north and Judah in the south, equals 12 tribes. The leaders, I would say, were there bringing up the ark of the Lord with joyful singing and the sound of the trumpet. Now, this idea here is bringing up. The word bringing up means that they are going up. This is about the elevation. Now, why is it going up? It's because Jerusalem is on a mountain. And in the south, where they were coming from the house of Oved Edom, Jerusalem would be the highest point, I would say, in the southern part of the land. And so we are told that they are bringing the ark of the Lord up. All right. And it says here with joyful shouting. This word here is about either a war cry, a shout of joy. At one time, I've tried to show you that this shout of joy is really very much like the Red Indians shout of joy. It's like jumping around, shouting, "Woo!" and 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 you get everybody in that same mood, and this is called joyful shouting. That's one, right? That's one. The second one is the sound of the trumpet or the horn, and this would be the shofar. So you would be seeing that the shofar is actually used at wartime battle. It is also used on the day of the trumpet, right? The Feast of Trumpet. You also see it now as they are celebrating the bringing of the ark, and they would be sounding the shofar just like the Feast of Trumpets, and they are making all the joyful noises and they are celebrating. And that's the picture we're getting in verse 15. In verse 16 again tells us, and then it happened, and then it happened. As they are bringing up the ark up to the city of David into Jerusalem, and so this is now a side narrative, and it's describing this as the ark of the Lord was coming into the city of David. And then we see this, that Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down through the window. Now, which window? This would be the palace of King David. And it would be I would say, a magnificent structure. And on top of the city of David, looking down, seeing how the people were bringing the ark in. And then suddenly she saw King David, look at what he did, leaping and dancing before the Lord. And she was contemptuous of him in her heart. And let's explain this a little bit. First, we must understand that the procession, right? The procession. So let me draw the procession. The procession was bringing the ark, and they are going this direction. And so when it says that he was leaping and dancing before the Lord, we are saying that this is King David in his ephod, twirling around and going this way. And so this is before. Before means to the face. What face? This is where God is symbolized to be. The ark of God is the throne of God above the cherubim. And so this is what it means by before the Lord. He was in front of the ark, and the whole procession was coming, and he was leaping. Now, this word leaping is hopping. You can say it's hopping. He's very agile, and so he is very nimble. I would say maybe you could say that he was dancing very well. The second word here is dancing, and again, this word dancing is to whirl around, right? And so this is likely to be an A and a B. How was he dancing? He was dancing by leaping around in a very agile manner and twirling around, right? He was very nimble. He was very able to move very well. Now, if you can see people dance today, you can tell between a person who's trained to dance and a person who really cannot dance. And so David was one who can really move. And then Michal, we're talking about Michal. She was contemptuous. This word here is despise. She was not happy. She was disdained. What else can we say? Um, she was. She has. She had low esteem, and so you can say he had low esteem for David. Even though he was the king, when she saw this, all her value system dropped. That is what contemptuous here would mean in the Hebrew. She was like, oh my goodness, what has happened to the king? That would be what is going on in her mind. So when it says her heart, it would be her mind. This is what's going on in her mind. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw what David was doing, twirling around, so nimble, dancing. And we read in verse 17, and it says this: Now they brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent which David had pitched for it. And so the ark came into a tent. This is not the tabernacle. This is just a tent. The tabernacle was in Nov. That's where the altar would be. Now, we had a question yesterday on this. And so they placed it inside the tent, which David had pitched for it. Now, we don't know exactly where this tent is, which means that this would be the city of David. And then we have Mount Moriah. This is the city of David. Right now, it is a speculation at this point, right? A speculation that the tent could be here, or the tent could be here, outside the city of David, but not on Mount Moriah just yet. And by this time, as David had pitched and placed it in, David offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. And so right now, you find that there would be sacrifices. So there would be somewhat of an altar. And then there would be animals sacrificed up to God. And so you find that this is going to be what we say burnt offerings. The word burnt offerings here, we need to remember, is olah, right? The word burnt offerings is olah, means something that rises up. And so when you burn it, there will be aroma, there will be smoke that will be rising up. You know, that would be how we are seeing it. That would be a burnt offering. Now, when you come to a peace offering, we find this word here. The peace offering is called shalem. Peace offering is usually a thanksgiving offering. It is a offering of completion where you have made a vow to God and now you give thanks that everything is done. And so peace offering is shalem. It's where we get the word shalom, where it's complete and there will be peace. And so the translation is called the peace offering. Before the Lord means it's in front of the ark of God. And so that is where it ended in the movement of the ark from the house of Oved, Edom, to this tent where David had pitched for it. We read in verse 18, when David had finished offering the completion of the burnt offering and the peace offerings, then he did this. He blessed the people in the name of the Lord of the armies. Now, this would be Jehovah Tsevaot. This is the name of the ark of God. It is also the name of God of the armies, where Israel is seen as the army and God the general. And this is very much the view that God wants Israel to see him, and he's the general in command, Jehovah Tsevaot. But we have David blessing. Notice this word, blessing. The people in the name or in the character of the God, of the Lord of armies, Jehovah Tzevaot. And what does this mean is this. Notice the word bless is to pronounce good things. And may God lift up his countenance upon you. Things of that nature, like Numbers chapter 6. It's pronouncing good things amongst the people so that they feel that God is to be with them. But after the pronouncement, you need to realize it is different from how God blessed Obed Edom. Here, it's David making the pronouncement, so it's very much just a pronouncement. In verse 19, you find that he distributed to all the people, all the multitude of Israel. The idea of multitude of Israel, you find that this is with reference to the crowd. It is also measured by the noise of Israel. So the multitude of Israel is an A and a B, right? To all the people, to all the multitude of Israel, where the noise of Israel is celebrating the bringing in of the Ark of God, to both men and women. And then you find that there is a cake of bread, and there it says the bread is one of dates and one of raisins to each one. And then the people left. What does that mean? The people walked home. The people left, and you see this as an A and a B. The word left is walked. And where did they walk? To his house. That's all we are told. To his house. We need to actually understand in the Hebrew, there is an additional word here. There is a loaf of bread. And so we have a loaf of bread and food, right? This is food, lechem, not just as bread. This word raisin, some have actually translated this as a barrel of wine. So we're not talking about raisins. We're talking about a barrel of wine, a cake of bread, and a portion of meat that was cooked with a portion of meat. Right? I think that was what it is saying. So we have a portion of dates and raisin, which is a barrel of wine. There is another word here that's kind of missing. So I'm not sure how to phrase it, but it's right here. It is about a type of meat. And we have bread. So there are three things here. We have bread, we have meat, and we have a barrel of wine. And this would be an ephah of wine. And this would be 1/6 of the bull, right? That was offered, that was slaughtered along the way. And so all of these would be, how would say is that this would be all the animals that were offered along the way, and they were all cut up and they were all passed out to all the people who came out to celebrate the return of the ark to the city of David. And as King David had it, he gave thanks, and the rest of the meat and the wine and the bread were all distributed as part of the ritual of the shalem, of the peace offering and the burnt offering. And I guess it's kind of hard to see it in the English, but that's what the Hebrew might be expressing as well. Right? So I just want you to know that it's talking about the bread, 1/6 of the bull, and an ephah of wine. And all of this is part of the shalem, the peace offering. Now, the final part for today would be in verses 20 and 21. So let's take a look at 20 and 21. That's our final passage. When David came to bless his own house, David first blessed all the people, and he knew how to extend to everyone first before himself. And that would be a very oriental expression as well. Came back and wanted to bless his own house. Then he found Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David, and she said this, and this really upset David. How the king of Israel dignified himself today. Now, what does that mean? The idea of dignified himself today, this word here, dignified, is honor. How did he honor himself today? He exposed himself today in the sight of his servants, the female slaves, the female handmaids, the female servants, as one of the ramble shamelessly exposes himself. So understand this. He exposed here. The word expose is to remove and uncover. And so you need to understand that he removed his kingly robes. And it seemed that he is seen to be uncovering himself with only an ephod, which is his inner undergarment. And that's what Michal is saying, that he exposed himself today in the eyes, right? In the eyes of his female servants as one of the, well, it says here, one of the vain, vain people, the worthless ones, exposes himself. And so Michal equated David as worthless. Now, obviously, you would know by now, if that is the case, David would be extremely upset. And so let's look at the final verses for today. Verse 21. But David said to Michal, I was in the I was before to the face of God. And this is what God, this is what God had decided. This word preferred means who chose me. Who chose me. Um, and this word to your father would be uh, from your father or above your father. And that would be Saul. And to all his house, including the sons. And then he made me, appointed me as ruler. The word ruler here means nagid, chief, chief over the people of the Lord, over Israel. So you can see here, there is an A, the people of the Lord, and Israel is talking about the same thing. And because of this, I will celebrate before the Lord. This is the reason to celebrate, right? To celebrate means uh to to laugh, to be happy, to sing, to dance. Yeah, all of these is celebratory for this word. Laughing and happy, right? Basically, laughing gestures, laughing and being very happy. In our last two verses, then it says, if I if I show myself to be of low esteem, right? If I show myself of low esteem, even more than this, and he says, even be lowly, and this word here is humble, humble, uh, in my own eyes, but with the female slaves whom you have spoken, with them I am to be held in honor. And so we need to know that these words here, demean myself and be lowly, this would be an A and a B. To consider myself of low esteem more than this, and to be humble in my own eyes, this is fine. Because in the eyes of the female slaves, they will hold me in honor because I am still the king of Israel. And Michal, you just don't understand. Now, in the last verse is where I want to point out to you all. In the last verse, it says, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child to the day of her death. Now, often we say that Michal had no children. She was barren. But it is not true. What this means is that David was upset, disappointed, disappointed with Michal to the point that he had no children with her. That's all. That's all it means. She had no child to the day of her death means from here on, and that would be the understanding. From here on. But before this, we also know that Michal had no children with David. And so she had no children with David till the day she died. This is how verse 23 would be understood. Now, it is important also for us to realize that there is a passage from Second Samuel, because we are going to go there later. Second Samuel chapter 21, verse 8. And we see that Michal and Merav's husband, Adriel, they had um they had 5 sons. And so Michal raised 5 sons for Merav's husband, Adriel, before she was brought back to David. But from here on in 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 23, because David is so unhappy with her, he never had children with Michal until the day she died. Right? This was important for us to see. This was Michal's fate, I guess, for what she had done at this point in time, looking at how she had treated David. Um, and and I guess this was how the king uh, is actually seeing Michal. It is sad. It's a sad story for Michal for this reaction and her outburst of not understanding David in his mind of celebratory spirit in the time of really joyfully bringing the Ark of God to the city of David. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 6 with a sad ending of a narrative with regards to Michal. And so we would never read of David having any children with Michal from here on. And so there was no sons born to David by Michal until the day she died. And with this, we come to the end of chapter 6. I ask that if you can go back and read chapter 7. Now, chapter 7 is one of the major milestones in 2 Samuel and in the life of David himself, commonly understood as the Davidic covenant. So with this, we come to the end of our session today. Bye-bye.